Just One Thing for Parents. Courtney Adamo is the mother of 5 children, ranging in age from 7 to 19. She has created courses and provides resources for parents, including a great program for parents of tweens and teens that I contributed to when I wrote The Incredible Teenage Brain. She lives in Australia, in the most beautiful part of the world. You will see from her Instagram account. And I think she just has a real gift in connecting with people and collating information she's learned about how to be a mum. So I invited her to talk on the podcast about her experience of being a parent to 5 children. What are the challenges? How has she overcome them? What has she learned? And she talks about really tuning into what each individual child needs, working out the best way to communicate with each child, which can be very, very different. And how the stage of development and birth order can also play a huge part in how we parent kids. So listen here as I ask Courtney this question. What's just one thing you've learned about parenting so many children? Okay, so welcome, Courtney. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
So the question for you is, what is just one thing that you've learned about parenting so many children?
Maybe just drown out the noise of the what you should do's and just really try to tune into your child, to your individual child on an individual basis and to understand what it is they need.
Amazing.
I think we do it instinctively when our children are babies. We know what cry needs responding. They're in their bed and there's a certain cry that that they need me. And then there's another cry where you can say, I'm going to let that one go for a little bit. And as a mother of a baby, we do kind of have this inner knowing of what our child needs and when they need it. And I think as they get older, we start to question maybe that strength in knowing. And there's so much noise, and so you can go on Instagram and just be, everyone's got an opinion and everyone's trying to be an expert on everything and everyone's telling you how to be a better parent. And there's so much value in so much of it, but it can undermine our own knowing and ability to parent these individual children. And so I do think that a lot of it really does come down to that.
And I just to add to that, I think one of the things that also makes it more complicated with older kids is that we have these triggers, that stories or reminders or whatever from our own childhood. So I think being aware of those and being insightful is so helpful when you have that emotional response, which a trigger to their behavior, like, gosh, I'm finding that irritating, or I'm finding that difficult. Then rather than putting that onto them, going, okay, I wonder what that's about, being curious about yourself is helpful.
Well, I was going to say that would be my next tip, is just to be curious about yourself and what sort of skill or understanding this is growing in you. Like I think we joked before we started recording about how I had 4 kids and literally none of them ever threw a tantrum. And I really did think that I was this wonderful parent that managed to have children who didn't throw temper tantrums, and probably smug. And then the universe sent me our 5th child and has humbled me. I mean, I just, in many ways, I feel like he made me realize that I cannot offer parenting advice because I just didn't even know what I was doing. And I really had to just ask myself, what am I learning here? What is he helping me grow in me? And what is this like teaching me? And I think that it can be a positive way to look at something too. Like, what is this child helping me learn in myself and grow in my capacity to be a better, more compassionate human?
Amazing. Yeah, because it strikes me that there's two things. I mean, there are many things, but two things that stand out from having so many kids of such a broad age range. First of all, as a parent, you have to adapt developmentally. Uh,
Yeah,
you have to do almost be different depending on the age of the child. And then what you're also talking about is the fact that each child arrives with their own temperament and personality and
yeah,
needs and ways in which they respond to the world. And then I suppose you throw those things together, and then you're parenting 5 kids of all the different ages and
yeah.
different temperaments, and that must present its challenges as well.
I mean, the hardest so far, the
Yeah.
hardest phase in my parenting was definitely when we had a 14, 15-year-old boy
Mm.
and then a 3-year-old toddler.
Wow.
I mean, that was difficult because there were so many emotions and, you know, that a brain in development on both sides, and
Yes.
they both had, emotional meltdowns
Mm,
often.
mm,
And you're trying to support a teenager, having them and a toddler at the same time, and it just felt really disruptive to our family. So I was conscious of the three in the middle who
yeah.
were not in those phases. And yeah, that was difficult. I'm really glad we're past that phase.
Yeah. And I think what you're pointing out there is that this toddler phase and often a teenage phase are these periods of very significant brain development. But
Yeah,
when parenting can be in high demand during those times.
yeah,
And then the bits around it, particularly that middle phase, they sometimes call those the golden years.
yes.
When
it
things
definitely
calm.
It definitely felt like that when you had these kind of one, toddler and a teenager, and then the ones in the middle, I was just so grateful for their
Yes.
beautiful, level-headedness. In many ways, it was funny having a teenager and a toddler at the same time because in some ways they're actually so similar,
Right.
and
Wow.
um, and it was a reminder to me also how much patience we sometimes have we can have for our toddler. They can be throwing the biggest tantrum and we still are able to dig up this incredible patience and this love for them. And yet when our teenagers essentially doing the same thing, and this is something I've definitely learned about adolescence, and I've gotten better, but he was my first one, and so I was making mistakes. But you just have expectations
Mm.
that they're going to be more eh, you know more responsible and more, just I don't know, I just kept just expecting him to be better than he was, or to,
Yes.
and I had less patience for it and
Yeah.
less compassion for
Yeah.
his meltdowns. And I found it all very triggering, and I
Mm.
took it personally, and I kept thinking, if I must be doing something wrong that he's acting like this, where for some reason when your toddler's throwing a tantrum, you just chalk it up to
Mm.
toddler tantrums,
Mm.
and
Such an important point because they look like adults, and also
yeah,
when they're not in those emotional phases or in those emotional moments, their ability to be rational and to
mm,
problem solve is as
yeah,
good as ours.
yeah.
But we forget that their brain is still developing and those emotional bits are huge. They're
Yeah,
really in overdrive. Yeah, that's such an important thing that you observe there, or you
yeah,
experience.
it definitely was helpful, I think, in some ways, but like I said, that was incredibly challenging.
Yeah. So say a little about the different kind of temperaments and how it
Mm.
has an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's gosh, it's apparent in all of my kids, and on a daily basis, I'm reminded how different they all are. But even when I compare my first two, who are both boys, and now the eldest is 19 and then this next one is 17, but just how different those two are. The eldest one is quite emotionally straightforward, and he's very social, and I've been able to talk to him about anything. All his life I've been able to have conversations with him quite easily, and kind of he's kind of what you see is what you get with him. Whereas the next one is he's just emotionally complex, and he's an introvert, and very unlike me in many ways. I think, I can kind of relate to my eldest in lots of ways. I'm also an eldest, and there's in many ways I kind of get it. I get him, whereas the second one is different to me, and he just takes a lot more of a thoughtful approach in the way that I parent him, and even as just an example, just if I want to have a conversation with him, I really know I need to, the setting needs to be right. He needs to be in the right mood. Generally best if no one else is around. There needs to be some element of distraction. I like to talk to him and have conversations when he's at his sewing machine and I'm cutting fabric behind him, and and then I really have to ease into it with him. Whereas the older one, I could have just said, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Right. I could have said it at the dining table or at the kitchen, or it didn't matter where, and wow. And he would have been fine talking to me anywhere about anything. And it's just I've learned to take their cues and to really tune into what they require, and they each one requires something so different, and he doesn't come to tell me a lot, so I do have to be conscious of kind of asking him, and that. Whereas then the next one, I have a 15-year-old girl. She wants to come and tell me a lot, and she can get really quite emotional. But she doesn't want me to really say anything to her. She just wants me to listen. She doesn't want advice. And, and when I try to give her advice, she just gets her emotions just get heightened. And so with her, then I've learned, I just really have to just listen, acknowledge, be there, and that it's always best to wait for her to calm down to then come back to that conversation when her brain is able to have a more be a bit more rational.
Yeah. So gosh, you're really talking about this concept, I think, in psychology called attunement. And it's so important, and reading their cues. So it's so amazing, with different kids, as you say, you learn a little bit more about yourself. One of the interesting things you say there is that you have one kid who's very like you and one who isn't is very dissimilar. And I think that is something that we don't talk enough about as parents.
Yeah.
Because
I think I'm fascinated by it because I also come from a big family. I'm the eldest of 5.
Oh, are you? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I did take a course in university, and actually, of all the courses I took in getting my degree, that was probably my favorite one, and it was the psychology of birth order. And it was about birth order, which I just found so interesting, especially coming from a big family. And now I've gone on to have 5 kids of my own, and just I really think there's something to it. And I love really thinking about it like that. And yeah, I mean, in many ways.
What are the big things that they say about birth order? Are there some key takeaways?
Well, I'd hate to get it completely wrong, especially speaking to a psychologist, but I know that, I know from myself and also seeing my children, that firstborns, they can, because they've had a lot of attention on them, they are quite attention seeking in the way that they want approval. Whereas second children can be more effortless in the way they go through their days, and without that feeling of attention and approval being quite important. And like, I think they say typically that firstborns are more driven, or often can be more driven. But there's so many differences too, I think, with gender. So for example, in the family that I come from, it was me and my sister, so 2 girls and then 3 boys. And so the eldest boy kind of becomes an eldest again because of the gender differences. So those things I just find it really fascinating, because I can see it with my kids too. And I also always joke that in my next life, I'd really like to come back as a youngest child.
Oh, really?
Because that, especially in a big family, I mean, I look at my youngest, he's 7 now, and he can be so annoying and so just, I don't know, just so kind of without any sort of need to like apologize.
Really,
like unapologetically himself.
Right.
Very
Wow.
free.
Wow.
And yet he knows he's so loved. He's got this confidence and this he's just, I don't know, it's so effortless. And I see that definitely with my youngest brother, and how, this is always so funny when I'll go, they're all in America, and I'll go home to America, and it'll be this wonderful thing where we're all in the same town, and my parents will invite everyone to dinner, and they live in the same town, and they'll invite my siblings, and my youngest brother can say, no, sorry, I don't feel like it, and just completely be fine with that.
Wow.
Whereas I am the eldest child, and I just think, I could never say that. I could just never say that. I feel this expectation to be good and to be there for my family and to do the right thing. I mean, I've spent 43 years trying to stop caring what people think of me. It's definitely something that I'm working on, but hopefully, in my next life, I'd like to be a youngest child.
So the developmental factors, there's birth order, and then there's temperament as well, isn't
there?
And those things are all different. We have to be aware of
totally.
Them. And then I think the fourth thing is your similarity. And I can think of a lot of parents that I've worked with, actually, but one in particular just springs to mind, who and both parents were only children, and they were both extremely good and hardworking and didn't cause any problems for their parents, and just got on with things and very successful. And they have these kids who are just throwing all the rules out the window.
Right.
They are making life so difficult. And they say to me, we cannot understand it. We don't have any model of that. And I think it makes that empathy step really hard, doesn't it?
I think it does. Yeah, it definitely adds an extra challenging layer when you're trying to have a relationship with this other human, and you can't. I mean, it really, like, we are all so different, right? Like, even though they're your child, they're their own person, and it can be quite difficult when you just don't kind of understand. And also saying that, I think can be also quite challenging when they are so like you, and you can see traits that maybe you've worked on over the years, and they're showing you something, and it can be triggering. I sometimes my fourth, she's 11, and she's just entering adolescence and just starting to show these kind of this quest for independence and showing more of an opinion and wanting to express those opinions. And I actually have been finding it a little bit triggering, because she she challenges back, but in such an articulate way that I don't really know how to. It's not just this emotional reaction. I can kind of ignore those. You know, my daughter, just the one above her. I find it so easy to just kind of not get triggered by her emotional outbursts because they don't really make sense. They're just kind of irrational. And but the 11-year-old, she has these very rational emotional outbursts. And I think I was the same, and I find it, I can recognize myself in her, and I find that also triggering. So, you know, it's really this whole parenting thing, it's really not easy.
So great. I think it's so nice for all parents to hear that. It really is complicated. Thank you so much, Courtney, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And all your advice.
Thank you.